Constitution Day event co-sponsored by the Scalia Law School and the Schar School of Policy and Government. I am Mark Rozelle, the Dean of the Schar School, and Scalia School Dean Ken Randall kindly asked me to do this welcome jointly on behalf of both of our schools. So thank you, Ken. I also want to acknowledge the major benefactor, namesake of the Schar School, Dwight Schar and his son Spencer, who are here with us today. Now to our special guest. Mike Pence was born in Columbus, Indiana in 1959 into a family that epitomized the American dream, instilling in him the values of hard work, faith, and family. After graduating from Hanover College and the Indiana University School of Law, he embarked on a multifaceted career, including law practice, hosting a talk show, serving as a congressman for 6 terms. He was elected the 50th governor of Indiana, focusing on tax cuts, job creation, education reform, and infrastructure investment while maintaining fiscal responsibility. His accomplishments in Indiana led to his selection as the 48th Vice President of the United States. Mike Pence's conservative philosophy, inspired by Ronald Reagan, led to his founding Advancing American Freedom, which continues to advocate for faith, family, and liberty as foundational American values. And I cannot think of a better person to speak on Constitution Day. Please give a George Mason University welcome to Vice President Mike Pence.
Well, thank you very much, Dean Rozelle. Thank you all for coming out. Happy Constitution Day. It's really an honor to be here at George Mason University, especially today. And I want to give you a chance to thank Dean Mark Rozelle and Dean Ken Randall of the Scalia Law School for bringing us together to have a conversation about the founding charter of the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world, the Constitution of the United States. Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Dean. We couldn't be more grateful. I also want to acknowledge, although introducing him twice, he's not the kind of man that looks for attention, but I think there are very few people, not just in the state of Virginia, but in this country, who have made a greater investment in improving the quality of education, particularly higher education across this country, than the namesake of the George Mason University School of Policy and Government. Would you join me in thanking Dwight Schar and members of his family who are with us today? Dwight, thank you. And in case you didn't hear about it, today is also my first official day as a distinguished professor of the Schar School of Policy and Government. Although I think the only thing that would qualify me for being distinguished would be the color of my hair. So, but I'm deeply humbled and deeply honored, Dean, to have the affiliation with the school, and I'm grateful to you and all the faculty for welcoming me here today. Constitution Day is a day when, as Americans, we do well to reflect on first principles. I must tell you, growing up in a small town in southern Indiana, I don't remember us marking Constitution Day, but this was the day, I think by my lights, more than 230 years ago, that the 39 delegates of the Constitutional Convention put their signatures on a document that literally would provide the foundation for the republic in which we have now enjoyed the highest quality of life and the greatest freedoms ever known to mankind. September 17, 1787, the Constitutional Convention came to a conclusion. And I must tell you, I had a very moving experience today. If any of you follows me on X, you can actually look at pictures of it while I'm talking today. My staff told me as I flew in from Indiana that for the first time in history, the National Archives are displaying the entire Constitution, literally stem to stern through every amendment. And as a history major from Hanover College in Hanover, Indiana, with a special focus on the American founding, it was thrilling to me to look at all of these pages in just one place. And in fact, this will sound a little bit wonky, but I was particularly impressed with the fact that the Constitution, which always is displayed in all 4 of its pages at our National Archives, is actually a 5-page document. And for only the second time in American history, Dean, the 5th page was displayed today at the National Archives. Now, the 5th page is actually not part of the content of the Constitution itself. Just for those of you that are taking notes, it's what's called the transmission page, which I had some familiarity with because as a member of Congress, when a bill is passed and enrolled, then the Speaker of the House, or as the case may be, the leadership of the House or Senate, will sign a document transmitting the bill to the President of the United States. This was the transmission document that directed that the Constitution be forwarded to all of the several states for ratification and consideration, which would take some time, as history records. But on that page was only one signature. It might be a fun trivia question for you to win every single time with your friends, because George Washington signed the Constitution not only as its first signatory, but also he signed the transmission page. I learned that today, and I'm fairly impressed with myself. I'm going to win. I'm going to win a few gentlemen's bets in the future about that. But being there at the National Archives, and traveling with some of the interns that are working at our foundation in Washington, D.C., my one enduring takeaway to them, and it's one that I, as someone who believes in a strict construction of the Constitution itself, was what I hope that they all came away with. That the Constitution is not a relic of the past. It's not a set of amorphous ideas. It's a charter that they wrote down on paper. And they, in the same spirit of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, they pledged their lives to it and their honor to it. And in a very real sense, that's where I think we begin on a Constitution Day. It's just to remember that the founders of this country crafted this Constitution, actually in the wake of the success in the Revolutionary War and the failure of the Articles of Confederation. They came together on that hot summer in 1787 and said, we want to bring all the best of history together, the best understandings of human nature. We want to create a framework of limited government. And they succeeded, I believe, perhaps even far beyond their wildest imaginations. Now, my love for the Constitution actually began when I was even a little bit younger than some of the students that are gathered here. I was raised in a family that really lived the American dream. My grandfather immigrated to this country from Ireland. My dad and mom built a small business in a small town. My father was a combat veteran. We have a retired officer of South Korea's military here. My dad fought in the Korean War. But all along the way, I was steeped in a great sense of patriotism about the country. But it wasn't until I found myself in an American Legion speech contest where you were required to write a speech on the Constitution that I began what has been a lifelong fascination with this document. It was there and in competitions that would follow that I would go on to college and make a special emphasis on focusing on the Constitution. Now, many people just think the Constitution itself, as I said, is just a governing document for the country, but to rightly understand it, it's so much more. And it's been the bulwark and the vouchsafe of our liberties ever since. I mean, the framers of the Constitution understood that unchecked power, even in a democracy, is dangerous. And need look no further than the French Revolution, which incidentally was happening in 1787. It began with the same themes. I don't know how to say it in French, but my wife speaks French fluently. She could take all the same things, liberty and equality, all of those things, the same things we talked about in our revolution, they talked about in theirs. The difference, their revolution collapsed into dictatorship in less than a generation. Our revolution resulted under the Constitution in a democratic republic that survives to this day. They devised a system of divided powers, checks and balances, and carefully enumerated rights and privileges so that liberty would endure from generation to generation, and it has. Now, I must tell you, I had mentors in college along the way. Just last year, the late Dr. George M. Curtis III passed away in his 90s. But he was someone who, when I went to college, challenged me deeply to think about the Constitution, not just as a structural document, but as a philosophical document. I mean, I love to tell people that the Constitution itself is a document of limited government. And everyone who has some familiarity with the Constitution, and both the deans know that, and all the faculty that are here understand it, is the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says, as I've witnessed it today, that the powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and the people. But I always love to tell people a right reading of the Constitution tells you that the 10th Amendment is not a new thought, it's actually an exclamation mark. I mean, the first 10 amendments were part of a compromise that came together to see to it that the Constitution would be able to pass. But the 10th Amendment actually captures the principles and the framework of the entire document, which was we are going to create a federal government of limited and enumerated powers. And so they did. But in any event, I hope all of you today find the kind of mentors I've had in my life that'll challenge you to, as Americans, to think about that document in new and in renewed ways. Because the Constitution is not a relic of the past, it's a blueprint for the future. I mean, there are some people that say to this day that in these divisive times in which we live, that the Constitution is inadequate to meet this moment in American life, to solve the challenges that we face, to form a more perfect union. But as Yuval Levin argues in his recent book entitled American Covenant, which I recommend to everyone here in this room, that actually, while the early American experiment was not ethnically diverse and had not yet come to terms with the great sin of slavery, the truth was the Constitution was actually fashioned in an intensely divided political environment. And it was designed to create a framework where differences could be resolved between various interests, in the North, the South, the agricultural to the larger cities and ports, those that traded and those that grew crops. It was, in every real sense, it was designed as a place where different interests could come together and find common cause. And so it still is today, I believe with all my heart. I mean, the truth is, as I said at the beginning, the Constitution is the greatest charter for freedom in human history. But most importantly, because it was founded on the very same principle that our Declaration of Independence was founded on. That our rights do not come from sovereigns, they even do not come from government, that, as the Declaration reads, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. The Constitution, in a very real sense, took that principle and created a framework to protect those rights, and in its last 10 amendments, it articulated the heart of those rights for the American people. Now, some in our country take the Constitution for granted today, and some take that principle I just described for granted, but it was, it's important to note, it was a transformational idea in 1776 in the world. I mean, the world up until that time was unfamiliar with government by the consent of the governed. But this document began with 3 words. It changed all that. And it's still true today. It's important to remember as we think about the Constitution, and maybe you'll make your way to the National Archives during this exhibit, that the wisdom that is enshrined there was acquired at great expense through trial and error, through the experiments in democracy that were the early colonies, and of course the failure of the Articles of Confederation. In a very real sense, we do well not to gainsay the wisdom enshrined there, but to study it, to understand it, understand why it's worked for so long. Now, we live in a time when some across the political spectrum would disregard aspects of the Constitution. I mean, there are some on the political left in America today that would rewrite the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. But just as much, there are some on the political right who would disregard the prerogatives of the Congress when it comes to taxation and even tariffs. But I hold the view that the Constitution is a document that our founders wrote down, put their names to, because they intended it to be adhered to. And so much of the success of our nation to this very day and in the future is dependent on our fealty to the Constitution itself. My favorite George Washington quote, and George Washington is probably my favorite, you probably picked it up when I was talking about learning, that he signed the Constitution twice. I tell people sometimes I dye my hair to look more like George Washington. George Washington said, "The Constitution is the guide I will never abandon." And he never did. You know, for those of you that will matriculate from the Schar School of Policy and Government, those of you that will graduate from the Scalia Law School, many of you, I know, were drawn to these schools and drawn to this region because you're drawn to public service. And let me say, public service is a noble profession. It's admirable. And that aspiration that you have ought to be affirmed, and I affirm it today. But if you step into public service in any role, whether it's elected or appointed, or whether it's wearing the uniform of the United States or local law enforcement, you'll take the same oath. You'll put your left hand on the Bible. You'll raise your right hand. And you'll swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You'll bear true faith and allegiance to the same. You'll take the obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And you will pledge to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you're about to enter. And it ends with a prayer. So help me God. It's the same oath my son, who is currently deployed in the United States Marine Corps, took when he got his commission. It's the same oath my father took before he deployed to Korea so many years ago. And it's the oath that you'll take. And understanding what that means, and that it is an oath in every sense, I believe in my heart, that is a sacred oath that you will take. So much depends for the future of the country. And the temptation will be that you may think from time to time in the roles in which you are playing that it'd be politically expedient to do something other than keep your oath. But I hold the view, as the psalmist wrote, that you keep your oath even when it hurts. And I would say to any of you that aspire to public service, you should take no other view. That your first obligation will be to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And you keep that promise that you make. to the American people, and to Almighty God. That's why today matters. That's why what you're doing at George Mason University matters, and I commend you for this forum. The responsibility to preserve the Republic may well fall most heavily on your generation. You're coming of age at a time of unprecedented polarization, when trust in institutions is at historic lows, when the very idea of truth and timeless wisdom is often questioned. And I submit to you, it'll be up to you to stand in the breach, stand in the gap. The chain of this republic is only as strong as every single man and woman that has ever preserved its foundation. And so it will be for you. So today I want to challenge you as I close, and then I'm going to get to the really hard questions. Don't treat the Constitution as a relic or a museum piece. Treat it as something vibrant. Treat it as the operating system of the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world, and ask yourself why that's true. Read it, study it, argue about it. And most of all, commit yourself to do your part to ensure the Constitution is handed down to your children and your children's children. The truth is, whatever our differences in this country, I know in my heart of hearts that the Constitution is the common ground on which we stand. Many of us come from different perspectives, different faiths, different priorities and values, but if we will stand on the Constitution, we will find our way forward as one nation. And I encourage you to understand it. As I mentioned at a close here, at the National Archives today, I witnessed that Constitution all spread out under the glass. And it was deeply inspiring. I saw the 12th Amendment. I had the ladies that intern at our office pose in front of the 19th Amendment. But what moved me most was seeing those three words. Because if you've been to the archives, it's a little dark and dim in the room. Sometimes it's hard to make out exactly what the other smaller letters say, but there's three words that stand out. We the people. I mean, to think of this charter of human history that begins there is really the source of my hope. I mean, I'm very confident that whatever challenges we face in this country, we the people will find our way forward. I've traveled across America in my last job and in various roles before that. I've traveled around the world and seen servants in public uniform and in embassies. And I am convinced the American people are the hardest working, most generous, most innovative, gracious people the world has ever known. And I think it's altogether fitting that that charter begins and, in a very real sense, ends with them. And I simply believe that the American people will find a way. If all of us do our part in our moment to support and defend that which was enshrined so many years ago today, I am confident that the best days for our Constitution and the public and the republic that stands upon it, and our future will be boundless. So with faith in the American people, with faith in the Constitution, and faith in Him who has ever guided this one nation under God, let's all go do our part. Thank you. Happy Constitution Day.
All right, thank everybody for attending, and we're going to do the question and answer session right away. So we have mics on both sides of the room. So feel free to get up and line up, and I'm going to call on the students and other visitors today to do the question and answer session. I will warm up the audience first with one question. So you cited Ronald Reagan as your inspiration, Mr. Vice President, and I was intrigued by a comment of his. While a constitution may set forth rights and liberties, only the citizens can maintain and guarantee these freedoms. Active and informed citizenship is not just a right, it's a duty. How are we doing? How can we do better?
Well, I think the American people are doing well, much better than our politics these days. I mean, I tell people sometimes, Dean, that, you get 15 miles out of Washington, D.C., people in this country actually get along pretty well. They really do. And they believe in these ideals, and they believe in the right of their neighbor to believe as they choose to believe. I see it every day. Maybe it's because I live in the heartland. I got 5 acres and a pond. I got a riding mower. And I think the American people are going to see us through this. But I love President Reagan's statement that I hadn't read before, Dean, so I thank you. That this business of citizenship, whether you will step forward in public life or not, this business of citizenship is something we all own. And we all have an obligation to exercise and reflect in our character and the way we deal with one another.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to the audience now. Please introduce yourself if you don't mind, and we'll start on this side of the room. Sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Weil. I'm a master's student in the Schar School of Policy for International Security. I was
Great.
actually a Marine. I was actually in SEER school with your son, so that's pretty funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've seen him in not so fun times. So my question is, like you, I view the Constitution as a guiding light that never should change, never should waver. And I don't know if my peer age views it across the board to be the same guiding light. Going forward, as we start to take the helm of changing the country and helping maintain the values that we have in the Constitution, what should we do to reinforce to our peer group and our peer ages that the Constitution is still that guiding light that should never change?
Well, first, would you join me in thanking him for his service in the United States Marine Corps? Thank you. I honestly believe that what each of us can do is what you just did, and that is speak out among our countrymen about what the Constitution means to you, and to also understand that the Constitution protects the right of people that disagree with you on particular issues to have their voice. It's the reason why I say the Constitution is the common ground on which we stand. It creates a framework for free and open debate, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly. But I think as you maybe think about putting on a different uniform someday in public service, and I hope you do. I also think that just having people understand the framework of the Constitution, the separation of powers, the checks and balances. Our founders were very suspicious about concentrations of power. And they had, if you read the Declaration of Independence, it's kind of a beatdown on King George, the whole thing. It's very personal, really. A lot of people read the first parts that are very, idealistic and, and then you get to King, and then they just pound him. And it was that animated, I believe, the American Revolution. And so having people understand that there's in the days ahead, that even when it might benefit you or your political party in the short run to disregard those checks and balances, to me it's important that you do things that might not be in your short-term interest. And that can be the most compelling way to convey your convictions. So, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
Hello, sir. My name is Katie, and I'm nearing 10 years in the public sector now. I wanted to say that you emphasized governance hinges on the consent of the governed. And so based on your experience in the executive branch, what citizen outreach avenues have you seen be the most successful at reaching the cabinet? Personally speaking, on what resources citizens have to speak up against concerns for things like the genocide in Palestine?
Well, I grieve the loss of any life anywhere. And, but I think to the core of your question, probably the average citizen in America has more access to the public debate today at a wide level than at any time in the history of the country. The ability to, particularly in social media, to let your voice be heard is really unprecedented. It also carries with it risks when the people that are not what they seem to be are on social media, the people that are working agendas that are not transparent on social media. But I think you have a broad range of opportunities. I would tell you, I'm someone, I consider Israel to be our most cherished ally. And as I said, I grieve the loss of life in Gaza, but it would be a year ago January that I traveled to Israel for the first, I think I was the first, what they described as significant former official to visit after October the 7th. I walked through the communities that had been attacked, known as kibbutz. I walked through the field where largely college-age students were literally brutalized and slaughtered by Hamas. And it is my judgment, and I say it not in a, it gives me no joy to say it, but I think Hamas has to be destroyed. It represents an existential threat to Israel. And so I think it's important that we continue to stand with them. But I respect your right to give voice to your convictions, and that's part of what makes America America.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Pence. My name is Caridwin Albers. I'm a 2L at the Scalia Law School. I'm wondering to what extent you believe personal faith should influence new legislation, and if there is a line, where is it?
Well, people that know me well know I describe myself, I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. And, I came to faith in Jesus Christ when I was a freshman in college, after having really walked away from faith entirely. And I hope it continues to be the most important thing in my life. But, you know, there are some aspects of my faith that inform my views. I'm a strong believer in the sanctity of human life. But the Bible says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and that clearly informs my view. But honestly, where I hope my faith has most impacted my public service is in the way I deal with others, right? I mean, my faith, number one, my faith does not, it's against my faith to impose my faith on anybody, okay? Which is true. The other thing is my faith tells me to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And politics too often is do unto others before they do unto you, right? And I think maybe the reason why to this day I have very cordial relations with some of the most liberal Democrat members of Congress and liberal Democrat governors is because, not because they ever thought that I compromised anything that was a principle for me, but because I respected their right to hold the views they held. And they returned it in kind. So for me, that's, we don't talk about that enough, that I honestly believe that democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. And if anything, I hope my faith has impacted me, and others that share that faith. I hope if you go into public life, you'll understand you don't check that part of your faith at the door just because you're in politics. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great question.
Next question.
Sir.
Good evening. My name is Jordan Bomer. I'm a 1L at the Scalia Law School.
Very sorry to hear that. So
We're working through it.
I went to law school. Sorry, Dean. Nothing
but,
personal.
first of all, thank you so much for coming here tonight and for taking the time to answer our questions. Personally, for myself, and I think I can speak on behalf of at least some of the other law students here and around the country, when I say that your unwavering commitment to the Constitution is a massive source of inspiration. As someone going into the field of law, hoping to champion and uphold the Constitution in my career, and for the rest of us who are going into law or public policy, what means by which might we champion the Constitution in an age and a time where increasing polarization threatens the integrity of such?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm very humbled by your esteem, and grateful for your kind words. Look, here's the thing. Every one of you are going to be tested in your life. And there's a saying going around, particularly, I got 3 kids. They're 32, 31, and 30 right now. All married, doing great. More importantly, they've given us 4 grandchildren in the last 4 years. But so I kind of know a little bit about your generation from my kids. And there's a saying in your generation that says, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Right? You've heard that one. It said that adversity creates character, right? I actually disagree with that. I don't think adversity creates character. I think adversity reveals character. And when your time of testing comes, you are going to be the man or woman that you are preparing to be in every quiet moment up to that day. Okay? I mean, I early in my political career, I mean, you can grab my autobiography and read about it. I made my share of mistakes. Okay? Even after I came to my Christian faith, I set that stuff aside. I got involved in negative politics. Wrote about it in the book. The book is entitled So Help Me God. It's available on Amazon.com and where all good books are sold. Okay? But read about it. I'm not up here high and mighty. I learned some hard lessons along the way. But when opportunity a decade later came back around for me to be back in public life, I just determined that, look, we're going to work to keep faith with our family, to keep faith with our principles, and we're just going to take this wherever it leads. And I tried to use the time away from politics and even the time in to stay grounded in those things. And so I think just having integrity about what you believe and preparing for service, and the rest will take care of itself.
Thank you.
Is there another book on the way?
Yes, there is
Oh,
another book on
okay.
the way.
Yeah.
I may have to premiere it at George Mason University.
Okay, we'll sign that up. Okay, please, next question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Litchfield. I'm a student at the Schar School of Government.
Hi, Adam.
My question for you is, recently the Trump administration has threatened to withhold federal election funding from California and Maine if they didn't adapt to his voter ID laws. If you go back to May of 2020, they did the same thing towards Michigan under your administration to repeal mail-in ballots. My question for you is, do you think it is right that the federal government can just supersede any state law they don't like? And how does this go for the expansion of the federal government as a whole?
Yeah. No. No, they don't. Look, I just told you the 10th Amendment is an exclamation mark on the whole document. The founders really debated this issue of who runs elections. It's how they came up with this electoral college system and then ultimately amended in the Constitution. And it was born of a very simple principle, and that was they said if elections for national office are conducted in the new nation's capital, they will be vulnerable to foreign interference. Isn't that interesting? I mean, we heard a lot a few years ago about foreign interference in elections, but it actually was debated in the Constitutional Convention. Now, there was one country in particular they were worried about, right? The one we'd just beaten, the Redcoats, right? And they said, so what we will, here's the genius of it. What we're going to do is push our elections for president out to the states. And so states conduct our elections. States certify the elections. I mean, 4 years ago, I operated under the Constitution by God's grace. I know I'll always believe that I did my duty under the Constitution. But it's because in the Constitution it provides that once states certify the elections, the only role of Congress is to open and count the Electoral College votes, okay? And the conduct of elections, certainly I'm someone that believes in voter ID. We've had that in Indiana, and it hasn't, voter turnout's only increased ever since then, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court. But I think ultimately those are questions for the states, and I think it's in the interest of the nation that we continue to preserve that principle, okay? Thank you. Great question.
Okay, please introduce yourself. Next question.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. I'm not
Hi.
sure if you remember me. I was at the Pizza and Perspectives event like 2 weeks ago. Sorry, my name is Victor Alvarez. I'm a first-year Schar School student from Chicago. So, but my question for you is, given the fact that you had many threats on your life, one example being January 6th, just throughout your whole political career, how would you navigate kind of your own safety and the safety for your family and, you know, those type of concerns of safety?
I just honestly didn't think about it a whole lot. I've always said the safest place in the world is to be in the center of God's will. And if you're where you believe you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, you can have peace in your heart. For me, whether a member of Congress or when I was governor, we also had very talented men and women around us who looked after our families, and it was one of the reasons why on that fateful day 4 years ago, I was very confident that the Capitol Hill Police would have things in hand when I was first told that there was a riot unfolding at the Capitol. And I had seen them in action through my 12 years in the Congress. So it's not something I spent a lot of time thinking about, and don't to this day. I'm heartsick about what happened in Utah last week with my friend Charlie Kirk. And he was a good man, father of two, a devoted husband, and a voice for the freedom of speech and open debate. And it was a cause that he died for. And I believe that political violence has to be universally condemned, and must be. I commend law enforcement for their swift action in Utah. Spoke to the governor today. But, you know, I really do believe that after justice is served on that individual who's in custody, we do well to reflect on the way we're talking about politics with one another on both sides. But at the end of the day, I've always had peace about where I was and what I'm doing, and I always will.
Thank you.
Next question.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. My name is Lucas Granis. I'm also a first-year student at the Schar School.
Hi, Lucas.
And my question, I wanted to touch a little bit on what you were just talking about. In light of the tragic killing of Charlie Kirk last week, what action can political leaders take to promote the freedom of speech, especially in a climate where tensions and the weaponization of political rhetoric often leave little room for understanding?
Well, first, and I hope, I mean, as I said, I literally wept last week when we received word that that Charlie had succumbed. to his injuries. It was a heinous attack, and I do think it's important to pause at a moment like this and tap the brake on trying to blame anybody other than the person that pulled the trigger. I mean, I remember I was in the White House when an assailant who apparently watched MSNBC all the time attacked Republicans practicing for the annual congressional baseball game, and nearly took the life of my friend Congressman Steve Scalise. This was someone who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, was animated by politics, but he was the one responsible for what happened that day, not any political figure, not any political rhetoric. So I think we have to stop and make it clear that that those that perpetrate political violence are the ones who are responsible for the political violence. And now comes justice in that case. And for my part, whether it's political violence or mass shootings, there are particular crimes so heinous that I honestly believe that we ought to think about expedited due process. Justice delayed is justice denied. I think we ought to think about reforms that would ensure that justice was swift and certain in those cases, not years and decades later. That being said, I do believe that people who are in leadership roles in public life should recognize that democracy depends on heavy doses of civility, and that how we talk about one another shapes not just the public debate, but how the public thinks about politics. And I'm someone who has always believed, as I said earlier, that you can disagree without being disagreeable. And I would say there has been offenders on both sides of this, as in all my 20 years in public service and since. And my hope is that maybe a legacy of that tragic day last week will be that men and women in public life will start to think twice. Let's have the debate. The political debate in America has always been rough and tumble, full contact. But it ought to be a battle of ideas. It ought to be a battle of policies. It ought to be a battle going out and getting the votes. And it ought to recognize that that we're all in this together. And I believe we will be there. I believe that this divisive season in which we are passing through will come to an end, and America will come back together. Why am I so convinced? Because I've seen it. Last week marked a terrible tragedy in Utah, and the next day marked the 24th anniversary of another tragedy. I was on Capitol Hill on September 11, 2001. I saw the mountains of smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. I traveled to Ground Zero a week later in New York City. I was in Shanksville when it was still just a wooden cross in the middle of the field a few months later. And I witnessed in that moment, because it was a very divisive time in the life of the nation. You're too young to remember, but some of the folks with hair my color remember the 1990s was a very divided time. Great controversy in the White House. Impeachment took place. I mean, there was all manner of political feuding going on. But boy, when that happened, I'll tell you what, there were no more Republicans in Washington, D.C. There were no more Democrats. There were just Americans. And the country came together when it mattered most. And we will again.
Thank you, sir.
So help us God.
Next question, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. My name is Mohammed Fadag. I'm a first semester master's student here at the Schar School.
Yeah, good for you. Thanks, Mohammed.
Yes. My question is sort of in line with some of the others. In light of recent politically motivated violence, how do we lower the temperature in the national discourse and bridge across party lines to lead to less division and polarization?
Well, again, I think the first thing we ought to recognize is whether it was the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk, whether it was the 2 assassination attempts on President Trump, whether it was this Mangione guy who killed a healthcare executive, a family man walking down the street in New York. The person responsible for the violence is the person that pulled the trigger. And I just have to tell you, there's a part of me that wants to say, let's not put America on trial every time somebody is overtaken by evil and violence and acts out against leaders in this country. So that's kind of first. But second, once you recognize that, then I do think it all begins with how you carry yourself. It really does. I mean, I've often said, I'm a conservative, but I'm not in a bad mood about it, right? And I think that's the way most Americans get along with people in their family, get along with people at work who disagree with them on issues. I've often said, we just got to have government as good as our people again. To get back to politics that wasn't that long ago, was it, Dean, where you had somebody like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill who fought like cats all day long in Washington, D.C., and then a couple of good Irishmen went out for a drink after the Congress adjourned and swapped stories and told jokes because they're Americans at the end of the day. And I honestly think that I think negative personal attacks have no place in public life. I've avoided them. I didn't always. Go read my book. You'll find out. Yes. Okay. But I honestly think if you'll just check yourself, if you be men and women of integrity to that principle, not only will you, I believe, contribute to your own ability to lead, but also you'll contribute to lifting up the debate in this country.
All right. Thank
Next
you.
question, please.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for being here. My name is Matthew Romano. I'm a first-year student at the Schar School of Government.
Congratulations.
With the Trump administration moving at breakneck speed to enact its domestic agenda, what do you make of the administration's largest legislative victory, the Big Beautiful Bill, and all it entails?
Well, when I was vice president, we worked very hard to pass what I like to call the Trump-Pence tax cuts. Nobody else calls them that. But I was president of the Senate at the time. I knew everybody in Congress, and so we worked hard to lower taxes on working families and small businesses, and right up until COVID, it created a booming economy that still laid a foundation today. So for me, it was a great accomplishment that they extended those tax rates. There was actually talk by some on the populist right to let the top marginal rate go up. But the truth is, and check this in the next economics class you take at the Schar School, about half of the people that file income over $1 million a year are just people who are small businesses filing as individuals. And so if that top rate had gone up, it actually would have been the largest tax increase on small business owners in the history of the country. So for me, that was a great accomplishment that we preserved that. Particularly, I would say I have a disagreement with the administration over the Liberation Day tariffs, the broad-based tariffs imposed on friend and foe alike around the world that now is going before the Supreme Court of the United States. My disagreement is that I think the Constitution gives the Congress the authority to impose taxes, including tariffs, Article 1, Section 8, and not the president to be able to unilaterally do that, but the court will decide it. So for me, preserving those tax rates was really important. I thought it was a great accomplishment. I frankly would have liked, for the sake of your generation, to have seen a greater step in the direction of restoring fiscal discipline in our national government. I mean, we have a national debt today of $37 trillion. It is on track to be $50 trillion within the next several years. We now have a debt larger than our nation's economy. We are now spending more money on interest payments for the national debt than we are on our national defense. I would have liked to seen the bill at least begin to introduce some common sense reforms to entitlements, which are the principal driver of our national spending. But other than that, I thought that the balance was useful and helpful to the economy.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Mr. Vice President, very welcome here. My name is Peter. I am a graduate student here studying conflict resolution and peace. Very required at these days around the world, particularly in the US. 10 years ago, I heard you give a inspirational speech at my former alma mater, University of Notre Dame, in your home state of Indiana, on the passing of Father Ted Hesburgh, where you spoke with several other leaders of different persuasions, Condoleezza Rice and Senator Joe Donnelly and others. And the speaker after you was former President Jimmy Carter, who spoke very eloquently about the need for bipartisanship. Here at the university, there's the Carter School for Peace and Reconciliation and Peace Studies, Conflict Resolution, as well as these noble other schools of Schar and Scalia. I wonder if you might speak to the importance of bipartisanship. You mentioned President Reagan and Tip O'Neill, one great Irishman and a great American, and the need really these days for bipartisanship, and would you encourage that with being part of your legacy?
Well, there's a lovely new book about President Carter that just came out, which you might enjoy. I wrote a jacket blurb for it. It's all based on his Sunday school lessons. He was President of the United States. He still taught Sunday school, and then for decades after he retired, at a little Baptist church in Plains, Georgia, he taught Sunday school every week. So you might enjoy it. I think it's entitled Sundays with the President. I think bipartisanship, has gotten kind of a bad name lately. But for me, true bipartisanship is not compromising principle. It's compromising on details, right? I mean, I don't think you should ever, if you're elected to Congress or the House or the Senate, I don't think you should ever violate what you believe is a core principle or what you told voters, that this is what I'm going to stand for when I get there. I mean, I always held the view, some people get elected to Congress and it's a little wet finger in the wind, whatever's the, what I perceive to be the most popular position to take on any given day. I would always tell people, they'd say, how are you approaching this, your job? And I'd say, I just vote right and go home for dinner. For me, when I got elected to Congress, I had told people, I'm a conservative. I believe in limited government, a strong defense, traditional values, and I'm going to vote that way. And if you don't like it, every 2 years you have a chance to unelect me, right? That was kind of what I thought the deal was. And I actually think that's what the founders had in mind for representative government. But along the way, where it's not a compromise of your principles or a core conviction or a promise you made to voters, there's lots of room. I mean, lots of things that we could work out in Congress. I got roads, I got bridges, I got rivers, I got details, I got healthcare programs, and I think that having a willing spirit about listening to the other side and looking for where you can have really common cause is in the best tradition of America. There's one of my favorite political philosophers is Russell Kirk. And you could read anything by Russell Kirk and you'll be better for it. But his most famous ism is he says, politics is the art of the possible. Politics is the art of the possible. I mean, so when you're in close majorities like we are right now, you want to get things done, you have to listen across the aisle, figure out how we get this done, or get most of it done. I love what Ronald Reagan said years ago. He said, anybody who votes with me 80% of the time is my friend, right? And so so if you take that attitude, but I back up for a second to tell you that I think civility is where it all begins. Look, if you conduct yourself in politics where you say to someone, you're not only wrong, but you're a bad person, then that eliminates the chance to find common ground, right? And so that's why I say democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. You start with civility, stand on principle, and you can find common cause more often than you'd imagine.
And I'll recommend to the audience the article you co-wrote, Conservatism or Populism. There's a heavy dose of Russell Kirk in that article. I enjoyed reading it.
There is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for speaking to us, Mr. Vice President. My name's Karan. I go to the Scalia Law School.
Hi, Karen.
And my question was, some originalist scholars like Randy Barnett say the 14th Amendment Privileges and Immunities Clause protects unenumerated economic rights. I was wondering whether you agree with this view or not.
Well, I'm going to give that question to the dean, who's over here from the law school. Let me talk to you afterwards, because that's a Scalia Law School level question.
Yeah, and I know you're on a tight schedule to catch a flight.
I am a little bit,
It
thank
is
you.
6 o'clock, so.
I do.
Do we have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah, please.
Okay, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, this side first.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. My name is Laura Moreira. I'm LLM candidate at Scalia Law School. I'm originally from Brazil, as you can see by my accent. My question is, what impact does it have on other nations when the United States leads by upholding its constitution as a guiding light, both in the past and going forward?
What was the first part of the question?
What impact does it have on other nations when the United States?
Great.
Yeah.
I didn't hear impact. Thank you. I think the success of the United States of America has been a guiding light in the free world. And our Constitution has inspired constitutional republics all across the Western world. And our prosperity and our quality of life has inspired other nations to look our way. I think, and I think it's what the founders had in mind. We never wanted to impose democracy on anybody else, and I think in the last 30 years there's been a lot of debate about that, right? President Bush gave us his second inaugural address, spoke about that democracy was a birthright of everyone in the world. I believe we're all endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. But I think the founders would have said, we want to inspire the world by our example. We want to facilitate the world to move in the direction of freedom. But we want to stop short of trying to impose it. But I think our Constitution has, you could Google it and see how many nations across the Western world took our Constitution and essentially used it as a framework for the way they organize their governments.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Vice President Pence. My name's Taylor Worthington. We met a few weeks ago. I'm from LaPorte, Indiana.
Oh, good. Finally, we end on a Hoosier.
I've got a question for Professor Pence.
Oh.
What courses will you be teaching in spring 2026? And are you prepared to use Canvas or not? Or do you know what Canvas is?
We'll help you with Canvas. You don't need to get involved in this.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, gee, look at the time. I've really got to go sit down. Who invited the Hoosier here? Good to see you again.
Yeah.
See a lot more of you.
Yes. So, and on that note, I want to thank you for joining the Schar School. We look forward to you teaching next semester. We haven't decided the course yet, but we're going to have a conversation about that. So let me thank the audience for being here on Constitution Day, and a special thank you to Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you all, everybody. God bless you.